What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a continuation of the stat focus series that I started earlier this week. I started with the skill class. I started with the mutant class. Sorry, skill class is going to be probably the next video in the series. But I started with mutant and now I'm doing the science class. So again, this video, the sole purpose of it is to inform people my opinion on the best offensive and defensive stat focus for every available 7-star science champion as of January, February 2025. So, let's start off here. Let's not dilly-dally. Let's get right into it. AntMan. So, AntMan offensively, I feel like crit's best thing for him. Doesn't really need anything else. Special damage would not be bad because of the primary use of his special 2 for those poisons. But special damage and crit are really the only two things to worry about for AntMan. And then defensively, I think armor is pretty solid for AntMan. I also would not mind energy resistance on AntMan because champions like Kate Bishop and other energy dealing champions are good at nuking him down, so reducing the amount of time that it takes to nuke him down because of having that energy resistance would be very nice. So I'd say these are probably the best stat focuses for Ant-Man in my opinion. Moving on to Captain America Infinity War. Man, I haven't played this champion in a hot minute, and it's funny, I've got the Awakened 7-star, and he's just kind of sitting here. So, Cap Infinity War definitely wants crit on that offensive stat focus. That special 2 can be pretty nasty when it's not a guaranteed crit, but when it's a critical hit, that special 2 can be pretty nasty. And then defensively, Captain America is not really a defender. You're not going to really see him on a line toward defense or anything like that. So I think Pierce is fine. Anything really works for Cap defense-wise. Count Nefaria, this guy, arguably the best champion released in the year 2024. Certainly the best science champion released in 2024. Count Nefaria is ridiculous. So, Count Nefaria, I feel crit is probably the best for him on offense. You really want to be landing those crits on the special 2, especially with all 15 of those Fury passives. And then defensively, I think Pierce is really strong because you're going to be blocking his specials very, very often. So blocking those specials because you're not going to be trying to dex them, right? The thing about Count Nefaria is his specials are extremely difficult to dex to the point where it's not really worth going for the risk. So I think Pierce makes a lot more sense because the block penetration is going to feel more impactful than the special damage itself. At least that's my understanding of how it works. If I'm wrong about that interaction, please correct me. I will absolutely make note of it in the next video if I am wrong about how that interaction works. But I think overall, because you'll be blocking more against Count Nefaria, it makes sense to have Pierce. So that is my recommendation for him on defense. Hulk, very simple. Crit on offense, more crits, more damage, big yellow numbers are good. And then defense, Pierce, you're going to be taking blocked hits against Hulk. So obviously, blocked hits with higher attack rating, they hurt. So that's what I recommend for Hulk. Immortal Hulk, one of my original favorite characters. I haven't played this guy in a while, but I'm actually pretty happy to have him as a 7-star. I might plan on ranking him up to rank 3 on my free-to-play account. I already have him at rank 2, and I enjoy him quite a bit. But offensively, I haven't even said his stat focus, but it should be crit. I think that's the best thing for Immortal Hulk on offense. You could honestly use special damage, and that might be better overall. I don't know how special damage interacts with the burst damage that he does, or whether or not it increases it or not. But crit or special damage seems like the best thing offensively. And then defensively, Hulk, block penetration would be okay. I think armor would actually be solid, or physical resistance, just making him more tanky. He already has a lot of health, so making it harder to chip down that health just seems like a solid idea. So I think physical resistance or armor makes the most sense for Hulk Immortal on defense. Joe Fixit. I'm going to start with defense here. Definitely block penetration. He has Disorients in his base kit that will be inflicted during his special attacks, and you're going to be blocking his special 1 for the most part. So definitely run the block pen stat focus for defense. Offense, definitely want to run crit. I don't know why I have crit damage on here. Maybe for a Battlegrounds meta of the past. But critical rating is definitely the best for Joe Fixit. Very much alike all the other Hulks. He wants more crits because critting deals more damage, and you benefit from it with using Joe Fixit because of his attack rating increase and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's for Joe. Luke Cage. Luke Cage, I gotta admit, guys, back in the day when Luke Cage first got buffed, he was okay. When he got buffed again more recently, I didn't really regard him super highly. I wasn't a huge fan of him, but I've come around on this guy. Clearly, I have him at rank 2. He's Sig 40 now. That's all natural Sig 40. This guy's awesome. Luke Cage is a really solid character, just a very powerful science attacker. So offense, it's definitely crit. I mean, the more crits, the better for Luke Cage. It also wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to run block proficiency. Luke Cage doesn't have the highest native block proficiency, so increasing it up to 69.1% would definitely not be a bad thing. But I think critical rating, definitely solid for Luke. He doesn't have the highest base crit chance, so bringing it up to almost 24%, that's a good idea on the stat focus for offense. And then defense, he's not really a defender. Pierce is fine. Armor, physical resistance would also be good. Any of those three work just fine. Mr. Negative. I'm not the biggest fan of this champ. He's good. I know he's good. I acknowledge he's good. Personally, I'm just not a huge fan of him. I don't find myself really using him super often. But if you do end up using him, I would think that crit is not necessarily the best stat focus for him. I would probably say it's block proficiency because... Oh, he's on defense, I think, so I can't change it. But I'd say offensively, it's block proficiency because you will be blocking with him more often than not. Like, you're not going to be blocking all the time, but the times you do block, you want to take less damage. So I think block proficiency is the best stat focus offensively for Mr. Negative. And then defensively, it doesn't necessarily matter. Block penetration is fine. Energy or physical resistance would also be solid. So whatever floats your boat for defense doesn't really matter. Negative is not necessarily a defender. Morbius, this guy is definitely a champion. So I've gone back and forth with whether he needs the special damage stat focus or the critical damage stat focus. I think in my testing, if I recall correctly, he benefits more from the critical damage stat focus than the special damage stat focus, but it's not by a lot. I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that his special 2 guaranteed crit deals more damage with the crit damage compared to the special damage. So you should run the critical damage, but if I'm wrong, the other option for Morbius on attack is special damage. It's one of the two. I'm pretty sure the best one is critical damage, but it could be special damage. So I'm not going to test that right now, but if you have a Morbius, go ahead and test that yourself and tell me if I'm right or wrong, because I don't remember. So it's either critical damage or special damage. And then defense stat focus for Morbius doesn't really matter. Block pen, any of the resistances would be good for him. Doesn't really matter. Photon. Photon definitely wants crit on offense. Obviously, she does have a super high critical rating at base, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to run critical damage to increase her critical damage hits. But my philosophy with like champions with already high crit ratings for the most part, you know, Stark Spidey is an exception. We'll get to him when we do that list. Is I would rather crit more often than crit harder when I do land a critical hit. Because the damage is going to be higher if you're critting more often. Even if the damage is lower than it could be with the crit damage stat focus, if you crit twice in a combo and it's lower than your crits could be with one of the critical damage stat focuses. But if you have this critical damage stat focus and you only crit once, overall the combo dealt less damage than it would have if you crit twice with the critical rating. Now I know diminishing returns are going to reduce the overall value of this, but at least for me and for right now, I like to run Photon with the critical rating. If you run critical damage, that's absolutely fine. You could also run special damage as well. It works very well for her. And then defense stat focus, I think physical resistance makes the most sense for her. I think she has native energy resistance. Yeah, so she has 35% native energy resistance. So giving her both energy and physical resistance makes her that much more annoying, especially when using characters who rely on physical damage. Just makes her even that much tankier. Obviously, you could run the block pen, which is great for, when she throws her special attacks into your block, but I think people have gotten pretty good at fighting Photon to where they don't necessarily do that nearly as often as they did when she first came out, so making her tankier, harder to kill, seems like the best alternative. Quick water break. Perfect timing. Quicksilver, one of my favorite champions in the entire game. So, kind of the same philosophy with Photon in terms of the offensive stat focus. Quicksilver, I'd rather crit more often than crit harder when I do crit. So that's why I have the critical rating stat focus on Quicksilver here. He doesn't necessarily need it because his damage is 99% from the whiplash and the trauma. So you could run any of the resistances on Quicksilver. The special damage is also not a bad idea. Hell, even the adrenaline for reducing the chip damage you take is not a bad idea. He's one of the only champions in the game where I could actually see the additional adrenaline stat focus mattering and being useful. So offensively doesn't really matter. Defensively, you definitely want to run block penetration. Same thing with North Star I talked about in the mutant video. Quicksilver is a multi-hit combo champion, so blocking more hits, which he will be doing, is going to increase the damage that those blocked hits deal to the opponent. So you definitely want to run the block pen stat focus with Quicksilver. Sandman. I am not a huge fan of Sandman, unfortunately. I wish he was just slightly better. I think he's fine. I just don't really enjoy using him too much, and he's unawakened, so I wouldn't use him regardless. So offensively, his critical rating and critical damage rating not very good. Block proficiency is okay. Armor is whatever. Sandman, he relies on burst damage, so you don't really need the crit or the crit damage. I think for Sandman, it makes the most sense to go for the armor penetration stat focus. So, from my understanding of armor penetration, it just increases the overall damage your hits deal because you're piercing through the opponent's base armor. I think every champion in the game has some level of base armor rating. So when you lower that because your hits have armor penetration, you're just dealing more overall base damage. Now, for a champion like Sandman, that's great. I feel the same way about champions like Kushala. Even Quicksilver would probably benefit from this on offense just because all of his hits deal more damage, special attacks and basic hits. So Armor Pen is a super underrated stat focus. I don't really see a lot of people running it, nor should they because it's sort of niche. But in characters like Sandman, like Quicksilver, where they don't rely on any specific stat focus to really enhance any of their abilities, it makes sense. And then defensively, I think Block Pen is fine. Any of the resistances would also be good for Sandman, make him a little tankier. Energy is probably what I would go for most situations. Sentry. Sentry is freaking awesome. I love Sentry so much. One of my favorite champions from last year. Such an incredible buff, honestly. Like when you take away the short form content mindset and like if this the idea that if this character isn't good for battlegrounds, they're not good. Sentry's awesome. Sentry's fantastic. Short form content is not everything. The other half of the competitive content scene is longer form content. With Alliance War and like EOP style stuff, where that's content that matters. The content that matters. Health pools are significantly higher. So that perfect triangle of content that matters with Alliance War, Everest content like EOP, and then Battlegrounds, they make up that trifecta. 2 out of 3 of those health pools in terms of overall like largeness, I guess, Sentry excels in. And even in short form content, he's not bad. But that's not the point of this video. I'm not going on another Sentry rant. You definitely want to run critical damage rating for Sentry on offense, and the reason being is this clause in his ability right here. Sentry converts any critical damage rating bonuses into attack rating, increasing his attack rating by up to, we'll just call that 6,000. So adding the critical damage rating stat focus just gives him a bump in attack that he wouldn't have otherwise, And even though it's not a significant bump in attack, everything counts, everything counts. So definitely run the critical damage rating for Sentry on offense, and then defense doesn't really matter. Block pen, any of the physical or energy stat focuses would do just fine. Deathless SheHulk, personally one of my favorite champions from last year. Big fan of this champion. Amazing iteration on SheHulk. Obviously, I'm still crossing my fingers that one day we get original SheHulk as a 7-star because my goodness, would I jump on that, faster than I don't know, someone think of something really clever to put here. Faster than a jackrabbit on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're just gonna roll with that. Anyway, Definitely She-Hulk. The best stat focus for her offensively is 100% the critical rating. When your hits crit with She-Hulk, that trauma damage goes through the roof. So definitely run crit on offense for She-Hulk. And then defense doesn't really matter. Block pen is fine. The physical resistance stat focus would also not be bad. Also energy resistance to bring her up to an increase in her overall energy resistance, because physical resistance, she already has some base level of it, 12.6%. Not bad. Giving her energy resistance, also not bad, but she's not a defender, so you don't really have to worry about that. Silk. Silk is a fantastic character. A champ that I definitely want to rank 3 at some point. I just haven't found the time nor the resources to take her up right away, but I do plan to get her up soon. She is amazing. Definitely one of the best science champs in the entire game. Offense is 100% crit. Crit makes the most sense. Critting more on those specials, especially with that Fury, it feels good. And then defensively, I think block pen is good just because you're blocking hits from her for the most part, and block hits hurt. So run block pen with Silk. Any of the resistance passives would also be good for her. So yeah, do what you will with the defense one. It doesn't really matter. I think block pen's the best. SpiderGwen. SpiderGwen's pretty cool. Haven't messed with her in a long time, but she's a cool champion. She is a very basic character. Run critical rating for more crits overall, and then run block pen on defense for more blocked hits, because she's an evade champion, and you're going to be blocking, hitting her during a parry stun, and then blocking again, etc., etc. Okay, tap again. Spider-Man Classic. So, I actually think the best stat focus for Spidey Classic offensively is critical damage. Spidey has an absurdly high critical rating, 38%. It's ridiculously high. So when you get to that certain threshold of like having above 35% native crit rating, you don't really need the critical rating stat focus. Crit damage makes a lot more sense. So that's what I run for Spidey Classic on offense. And then defense, again, same thing with all the other Spider champions. Just run Pierce. And, you know, I didn't realize this earlier, but in this lighting, I actually don't mind the new Spidey Classic look. He looks pretty good in this lighting. Also, natural Sig 140. That's all natural. Painful. Painful. SpiderPunk, really cool character. SpiderPunk, just such an awesome design. He is one of those champions that doesn't really benefit from any of the stat focus things specifically, but if you want to make him more sustainable, I actually think giving him energy resistance makes a lot of sense, because you can use him for onslaught and a lot of other champions that deal sort of energy damage, and giving him that resistance, it just makes him feel better. You know, critical rating is fine, but Spidey has 36% natural critical rating. He doesn't need help in that department. He's going to be landing crits just fine. Giving him energy resistance just makes him more tanky overall against champions that deal energy damage. And then defensively, block pen, just, the standard Spider-Verse defense stat focus. Spot. Spot's an awesome character. Really like Spot. Finally have him awakened, so he'll be making his way up to rank 2 at a minimum very soon. You definitely want to run the block proficiency stat focus for Spot. Ironically, Spot, being a champion that needs to block, doesn't have the highest block proficiency, so giving him more block proficiency from the stat focus definitely makes sense. And then defense, again, doesn't really matter. Block pen, any of the resistances, they work. Whatever you want to run with Spot. The leader. I think leader's a pretty cool champion. I just think leader is not as useful as he was on offense anymore because Count Nefaria exists. So, a little unfortunate that leader, he only had his time in the sun for like a couple of months, and then Nefaria came out, everyone bought Count Nefaria, and then nobody uses leader anymore. It's a little sad. It's a little sad. But he's still good, still useful. I still like leader. I just don't like him as much as I used to like him. But I'm not necessarily upset to have him as a 7-star. Do I need him at Sig 40? No, but I'm not gonna harp on that. Offensive stat focus, I think crit is fine. I don't really think he needs anything else, or anything else would be super impactful for him. Just landing more crits feels good. And then defense, I think the armor is fine, but honestly, he has native energy resistance. So if you give him the physical resistance stat focus, now he has both of those resistances in the positives, not just at a neutral 0. Now he has both physical and energy resistance. So that's probably the setup I would run with the leader. The Overseer, another fantastic character, natural Sig 80. This guy is sick. I'm kind of sad I haven't ranked him up because he really is a great character. And there's no real explanation as to why I haven't ranked him. haven't ranked him. I'm actually a big fan of Overseer. I like him quite a bit. I just don't really know why I haven't ranked him up. But Overseer, offensively, I think crit is the best thing for him. More crits with that Fury buff up during his Cosmic Radiation definitely makes sense. More crits, more damage. And then defense, I think Pierce is fine. But I believe, yeah, he doesn't have the highest. No, he actually has really high block efficiency. Never mind. I think Pierce is fine. Any of the resistances would also be good. Energy resistance is probably the one I would run over physical because of how champions with energy damage just melt certain attackers and defenders. Thing, 7-star Thing, kind of a crazy champion. Thing is still really powerful and really relevant. He's fantastic. Um, Thing on offense, I think crit makes the most sense. Once you build up all those Fury passives, you want to be critting way more often than, you would originally if you didn't have the crit stat focus. So I would run crit here. And then for defense, I would run block pen. I also think running physical resistance or energy resistance would be great to slow down champions that deal, physical and energy damage. Werewolf, Kate, any of those champions will get slowed down if Thing has any of the resistance passives. So I'll just throw on physical for now. So yeah, also slows down Tigra because of her physical damage. Titania. Man, I don't know how many champions I have left, but this video is over 20 minutes. I didn't mean to go there. Back to science, alphabetical, help, science champions. Okay, I'm just at the end here. I'm very close to the end. Okay, so Titania. Titania, super quick. I'm not going to waste you guys' time. Critical rating for offense, physical resistance for defense. She just wants to be more tanky on defense because that physical resistance. She already has 12%, so adding even more just makes her even tankier. And then Void. Offensively, I think crit is fine, but also running a resistance like energy or physical would be great for offensive purposes, just to make them more tanky in certain situations. And then defense, Pierce is fine. Also, any of the resistances work as well. Now, to cover the champions I don't own. Invisible Woman. I think crit is probably the best thing for Invisible Woman. She has a pretty high crit rating, but pushing it over that threshold of 35% probably makes her feel a lot better on offense. And then defense, I actually think armor is fine. Just making her more tanky overall to take more time to take off that force field. Yeah, feels pretty cool. So I think that's probably the best thing for Invisible Woman. Jessica Jones, offensively, doesn't really matter what she has. I think critical rating is fine. But you could just throw on any of the resistance passives. Adrenaline might be solid for Jessica Jones on offense, so anything really works in terms of attacker. Defender, I think the resistances are probably the best thing to do. She already has native physical and energy resistance, so increasing one of them even further just makes her even tankier. Armor would also be a really good idea because she has a really high base native armor rating. So any of those resistance passives or armor works for Jessica Jones. That's the 2-star Jessica Jones. Red Hulk. I do not have Red Hulk. Not donut. Do not. But Red Hulk wants the critical rating stat focus to increase the burst damage during his critical hits. So once Red Hulk has all of his heat charges, you land critical hits, and those heat charges deal more damage if you land a crit. So it just makes sense to run critical rating. And then defensively, I think any of the resistance passives. I'm gonna get so tired of saying the word resistance passives. Any of the physical or energy stat focuses for defense makes sense for Red Hulk. Also, Pierce is fine, but I think the physical or energy ones are great. Spider-Ham, man, I want this guy so bad. He is one of the only 7-star champions that I do not have from the base pool. And yeah, the moment I get this guy, whenever that moment is, he goes immediately up to rank 3 because Spider-Ham is absolutely insane. Offense, he doesn't really need anything. I think the best thing for him is actually block proficiency, making him even tankier, because you will be parrying quite a bit with Spider-Ham, going for those parry medium combos to place your porker poppers. So more block proficiency means less damage on parries. And then defensively, I think any of the physical or energy stat focuses are good. And block penetration is also good as well. But I'd personally want to run energy resistance on him just to shut down some of the energy champions that work really well for taking him out on defense. And then finally, Spidey 2099, Miguel O'Hara. I think the best offensive stat focus for him is not critical rating. I think it's probably it might be armor pen because he already has a really high critical rating and really high critical damage rating. So just increasing the overall damage you deal might be the best thing for him. Also, any of the resistance passives, physical or energy resistance, just making him tankier and more sustainable in certain matchups. Any of those work very well. So I think running the physical energy or armor pen is great for offense. And then defense doesn't really matter. I actually think armor might be the best thing because he already gains physical and energy resistance from his resistance up passives when you hit him. So making him even tankier just at a base with his overall armor rating seems like a solid idea for defense, but he's not really a defender, so it doesn't necessarily matter. So that is the entire science class as of January 2025 and every stat focus that I recommend running for champions on offense and defense. If you like this video series and this video overall, and I really hope that you did, please consider hitting subscribe and hitting that like button. Both of those things really help me out, and it gets the channel out there. It helps get the channel out there to the YouTube algorithm. It tells people that I'm making content that people are enjoying. So thank you all very much again for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.